I was born in a small town on the outskirts of Texas, where instead of an alarm clock, you are woken up by the sun shining through the thin curtains and the neighbor's rooster, which is clearly working overtime. Everyone there knew each other, and if they didn't know each other, they quickly found out through Aunt May's gossip. My childhood was a typical boy's adventure, climbing trees, riding a bike, figuring out ways to avoid chores. I had a father who was a man of few words, but with a firm hand and iron principles. He always said that respect is earned by actions, not words. I didn't always agree with him, especially when he demanded that I be home at 9 o'clock sharp, even if the most important match was on. But the older I got, the more I realized that he wanted to make a decent person out of me. Mother, the embodiment of patience and a master cook, had an amazing ability to maintain order even in the chaos of our family life. She could hold a pot of dinner in one hand and sort out my minor troubles at school with the other. Her pies were famous throughout the area, and her look could replace an entire lecture on morality. I had a brother too, but he left college early and only came up at Christmas to brag about how difficult it was for him. He and I were not particularly close as children. He was always too busy with his books and grandiose plans, and I gravitate more towards the street and sports. However, over the years our communication has become warmer. He was someone I could turn to for advice, even with a hint of sarcasm in return. I was not the tallest guy, but I was nimble. At school, the teachers didn't like me, but my friends loved me. It was easier with them. We played baseball in a vacant lot, ran away from class, and sometimes tried to impress the girls. The latter, by the way, did not always work out successfully, especially after the incident when I decided that an essay about romance and the explosion of a chemical flask could be combined into one event. My youth brought me several more valuable lessons. For example, never argue with the sheriff if you have fireworks on your hands, and if the girl says, "I'm fine," then you're in trouble. But despite all the adventures, I was still a guy who believed that there was something more ahead than just the hot Texas sun and working in a diner. Sometimes it seems to me that my youth was marked by troubles. But there is one memory that still makes me laugh and shudder. I was 17, and my best friend Eric and I decided that we urgently needed to make money. But instead of getting a normal job, we, like two geniuses, came up with a brilliant plan to sell fake passes to school events. It seemed like a win-win idea. A copy machine, a little trickery, and now several guys were paying us $5 for access to a private evening. The problem began when the head teacher stopped by that very evening. He quickly realized that something was wrong when he discovered that the room was twice as crowded as there should have been. Naturally, we were identified within half an hour. Harris, to the director's office. Immediately, said Mr. Davis, the head teacher, ominously when he found us behind the column. I tried to come up with some kind of excuse, but Eric, as always, decided to take matters into his own hands. We were just trying to help those who didn't have time to buy tickets, he said with the most innocent expression on his face. Davis looked at us with a look full of fatigue and disappointment. I hope you enjoy repainting the fence at the sports ground. Oh, and so we spent the next 3 weekends stripping off the old paint and applying new paint while the rest of the class grinned at us. We, of course, lost money, but we learned an unforgettable lesson. If we are going to engage in scams, then at least not in our own school. After that incident with fake passes, I decided that scams were not my thing. But that didn't mean that I stopped getting into stupid situations. Closer to graduation, I got a part-time job at an auto repair shop run by my dad's old friend, Mr. Rogers. The work was not difficult, mainly wiping windows, changing oil, and occasional rides on old cars that needed to be driven from one point to another. Nothing much until one day I received an assignment that could have ended in disaster. Jake, drive this Ford to Mr. Wilson's house. I wrote down the address for you, Rogers told me, throwing the keys. The Ford turned out to be an old Mustang that had clearly seen its best years. I started it up, and it purred like a grumpy old man. The road was empty, the evening was just beginning, and I decided to try my luck a little. I pressed the gas pedal a little harder, feeling the car come to life. Come on, old man, show your class, I grinned, switching to the next gear. At the start, I realized that I had overestimated my abilities. The Mustang skidded, and I almost crashed into a mailbox. In a panic, he twisted the steering wheel, and the car stopped abruptly, kicking up a cloud of dust. My heart was beating wildly. I went out, looked around, and then heard a familiar laugh. "You're quite the racer, Jake," Eric said. He stood at the curb with a can of soda and grinned. "I was just checking the suspension," I muttered, trying to maintain my dignity. Finally, when I finally reached Mr. Wilson, he looked at me doubtfully, then at the car. "I hope you didn't test its strength," he asked, narrowing his eyes. Since then, I have always remembered, if you are given the opportunity to drive, it is better to think twice whether it is worth it. As a teenager, I had one weakness, Lily Thompson. She lived 2 houses away from me, and every time I walked past, it was like I lost the ability to speak normally. She was a year younger than me, with long blonde hair and a smile that seemed to make the sun shine brighter. I watched her from a distance like a complete idiot, not knowing how to start a conversation with her. One summer, when I was 16 and she was 15, I finally decided to take a step forward. It was hot outside, and Lily was watering the lawn in her yard. I walked by with a bottle of soda, trying to look as casual as possible. "Hi, Lily," I said, hoping my voice wouldn't waver. She looked at me, smiled, and suddenly directed a stream of water straight into my face. "Oh, sorry, Jacob. I didn't want to." She laughed, covering her mouth with her hand. I blinked, wiped my face with my palm, and laughed. If I wanted to refresh myself, I could just offer a glass of water. She twirled a strand of hair around her finger, embarrassed. "Would you like some lemonade?" I just did it. I nodded, trying to hide my joy, and a minute later I was sitting on the porch of her house with a cold glass of lemonade in my hands. We talked about everything, about school, about music, about how she was tired of her younger brother, and I was tired of my older brother. I will remember this day forever. Since then, we began to communicate more often. She invited me over. Sometimes we rode our bikes around the block, and sometimes we just sat on the roof of her garage and chatted. Of course, I was head over heels in love, but I was too afraid to take the next step. I was afraid that if I said the wrong thing, everything would collapse. Another summer has passed, filled with laughter, endless conversations, and dreams of the future. I thought that we had many more days like this ahead, but reality decided otherwise. One morning, as I was leaving the house, I saw a moving truck outside Lily's house. Her parents bustled about, loading boxes and furniture, and she stood on the porch with her head down. I quickly approached, my heart pounding in my chest. "Are you leaving?" I asked, hoping that I had misheard. She raised her eyes, full of sadness, and nodded. "My father got a new job in California. We have to leave today." The world around me shrank into one point. I didn't know what to say, didn't know how to deal with it. "But when will you come back?" I asked, clutching at hope. Lily smiled sadly. "I'm not coming back, Jake. This is forever." I couldn't believe it. Yesterday, we sat on the roof of her garage and laughed at stupid stories, and today she will no longer be in my life. She stepped towards me and hugged me tightly. "Thank you for everything," she whispered. "You were my best friend." I clenched my fists, trying to hold back my emotions, but I couldn't. "You too, Lily." We stood there for a few more seconds until her mother called her into the car. She stepped back, walked slowly towards the car, and I just watched as she got in, closed the door, and the car drove off. I stood on the sidewalk, watching the car with Lily disappear around the bend. That was the last time I saw her. Over the course of several years of working in the company, I was able to not only get comfortable, but also gain a foothold in the team. I took on difficult tasks, showed initiative, and always brought projects to completion. This did not go unnoticed, and soon I was offered to manage a small department. The promotion was pleasant, but it brought with it not only new opportunities, but also new ill-wishers. Among them was Mark Rivers, one of the company's senior employees. He had worked here longer than me, considered himself indispensable, and was clearly not delighted with the fact that the newbie began to rapidly move up. He was irritated not only by my advancement, but also by the fact that I did not pay attention to his attempts to put himself above others. "Jake, don't you think you're being a little overzealous about this?" he asked one day while discussing a new project, fiddling with an expensive pen that he was clearly using more for status than for its intended purpose. "Don't you think someone should be doing this?" I replied calmly, not looking up from my paperwork. "Just be careful. Not everyone in this company likes change." He chuckled and walked out of the conference room, leaving a faint scent of his expensive cologne in the air. Mark not only demonstrated his hostility in words, but also in actions. He constantly tried to criticize my decisions, put a spoke in my wheels, and once even set me up by entering incorrect data into the general report. When they started to sort through the numbers during the meeting, I noticed that something didn't add up. "It's strange," I said, turning over the report. "Something is clearly wrong here." "Is something wrong? Are you implying that I was mistaken?" Mark sighed theatrically, folding his arms over his chest. "No, I'm hinting that we might reconsider the source of this data," I replied, maintaining my calm. Fortunately, I noticed the error in time and corrected it before the document was sent to management. Later, it turned out that the mistake was not accidental. Mark tried to make me look bad, but in the end, he himself received a warning from his superiors. After this incident, I realized that in the corporate world, professionalism alone is not enough. You also need to be able to maneuver between envious people and competitors. You need to be prepared not only for difficult tasks, but also for the intrigues that weave behind closed doors. But one thing I knew for sure was that I was not going to back down. After school, I didn't immediately know what I wanted. Like many people at this age, I had dreams, but there was no clear plan. At some point, I thought that I would become a musician. I played the guitar, even tried to write songs, but I quickly realized that this requires not only desire and talent, but also luck. "Jake, you're not seriously going to make money from this, are you?" my friend Eric once asked, watching me once again try to find the chords for my song. "Why not?" I objected. "Look, Johnny Cash also once just played in small clubs." "Yeah, but he had talent, and you only had a couple of good riffs," he laughed. As a result, I entered the university to study business, deciding that this field would give me more opportunities. Studying was easy for me, although I spent most of my time not so much on lectures, but on part-time jobs and new acquaintances. I wanted to be independent, not depend on my parents, and earn my own living. At first, I worked in a cafe, then got a job in a small company where I worked on market analysis and financial reports. This job, while not the most exciting, gave me important skills. Gradually, I realized that I liked to understand the mechanisms of business, find weak points, and propose solutions. So I had a goal to achieve success in this field. You realize this is no place for idealists. My boss once said to me as he watched me try to restructure the reporting system, "I understand, but if we don't change anything, well, keep marking time." "Okay, Jake, let's see what you can do. Just don't get too fanatical." I dreamed of a career of my own business. I imagined myself as the owner of a company, a person who makes decisions himself and builds something significant. Yes, I had ambitions, and I was ready to work to realize them. I believe that if you put in the effort, study, and don't give up, everything will work out. After graduation, I received an offer to work in a large company. The salary was average, but the prospects looked impressive. I was attracted by the idea of constant development, new challenges, and opportunities. I saw myself as a person who would achieve everything on his own without anyone's help. Life seemed like an open book, with only new chapters ahead and many paths from which you had to choose your own. "So do you accept the offer?" my father asked when I told him about the job. "I think yes. This is a good chance." "Well, I hope you know what you're doing. The main thing is don't forget who you are and don't lose your head in the pursuit of success." I nodded. At that moment, it seemed to me that I knew where I was going. I was confident that only the best awaited me ahead, and I was ready to work for it. Over several years of working in the company, I was able to not only get comfortable, but also gain a foothold in the team. I took on difficult tasks, showed initiative, and always brought projects to completion. This did not go unnoticed, and soon I was offered to manage a small department. The promotion was pleasant, but it brought with it not only new opportunities, but also new ill-wishers. Among them was Mark Rivers, one of the company's senior employees. He had worked here longer than me, considered himself indispensable, and was clearly not delighted with the fact that the newbie began to rapidly move up. He was irritated not only by my promotion, but also by the fact that I did not pay attention to his attempts to put himself above others. "Jake, don't you think you've taken on everything too zealously?" he asked one day while discussing a new project, twirling an expensive pen in his hands, which he clearly used more to demonstrate status than for its intended purpose. "Don't you think someone should do this?" I answered calmly, without looking up from the documentation. "Just be careful. Not everyone in this company likes change." He grinned and left the meeting room, leaving a slight smell of his expensive cologne in the air. Mark not only demonstrated his hostility in words, but also in actions. He constantly tried to criticize my decisions, put a spoke in my wheels, and once even set me up by entering incorrect data into the general report. When they started to sort through the numbers during the meeting, I noticed that something didn't add up. "It's strange," I said, turning over the report. "Something is clearly wrong here. Is something wrong? Are you implying that I was mistaken?" Mark sighed theatrically, folding his arms over his chest. "No, I'm hinting that we might reconsider the source of this data," I replied, maintaining my calm. Fortunately, I noticed the error in time and corrected it before the document was sent to management. Later, it turned out that the mistake was not accidental. Mark tried to make me look bad, but in the end, he himself received a warning from his superiors. After this incident, I realized that in the corporate world, professionalism alone is not enough. You also need to be able to maneuver between envious people and competitors. You need to be prepared not only for difficult tasks, but also for the intrigues that weave behind closed doors. But one thing I knew for sure was that I was not going to back down. My name is Jacob Harris, and I am 36 years old. I can't say that my life has gone the way I planned in my youth, but if you look from the outside, everything seems to be fine with me. At least that's what it seems to others. I'm tall 1 meter 90 with dark hair, which I cut short so as not to bother me. The eyes are brown, sometimes under certain light they give off an amber tint. My nose has been broken since high school, when I decided that being an American football quarterback was my calling. This turned out to be a mistake, but the scar remained and now gives me a more severe appearance. As I've gotten older, I've gotten used to keeping in shape, not because I'm a sports fan, but because I understand, if you push yourself, then there's no turning back. I go to the gym 4 times a week, but that doesn't mean I can't indulge in a burger and fries when my soul is scratching my head. By nature, I am a calm person, but not too soft. I always prefer to understand the situation before making decisions, but if I am pushed into a corner, I respond quickly and harshly. I don't like empty chatter and hypocrisy, although due to my duty, I have to endure them more than I would like. I work for a large consulting company in Chicago. I do analytics and develop strategies for clients who lack the ingenuity to understand finances or internal business issues. It's not the most exciting job, but it pays well and gives me a sense of stability. Sometimes it seems to me that I could do something more interesting, but in the world of large corporations, no one chases adrenaline. Calculation, discipline, and the ability to be in the right place at the right time are important here. When I have free time, I prefer to disconnect from the corporate world. I like fishing. It's the only place where I can completely relax and allow myself silence. Sometimes I go out into nature to spend the day in the forest or by the lake, just walking and enjoying the fresh air. I also love classic rock, and if I'm having a bad day, nothing lifts my spirits like good old Led Zeppelin. Besides, I'm a good cook. This is perhaps the only activity where I can be creative. Cooking helps me take my mind off the routine, and home-cooked dinner always tastes better than a restaurant meal. "Jake, have you ever taken a vacation?" A voice came over the phone. It was my brother, Brian. Yes, everything is fine with me, I answered, twisting the flat bottle cap in my hands. Fine. You work non-stop, and on weekends you sit by the lake alone. Are you even dating anyone? Are you going to give me a lecture now? I grinned. No, I'm just trying to remind you that life is not all work and fishing. Thank you for your concern, Dr. Phil. Lately my life has become too quiet. Maybe this is the calm before the storm, or maybe it's a sign that it's time to change something. But while I'm not in a hurry to look for the meaning of life, it will most likely find me. I had absolutely no plans to meet anyone new that evening. It was an ordinary corporate event, which, to be honest, I didn't really want to attend. But it was impossible to refuse attendance at such events was considered mandatory. I ended up in the large dining room of a fancy restaurant, glass of whiskey in hand, trying to have polite conversations with my colleagues. I was already thinking about how to leave unnoticed when I noticed her. She laughed, throwing her head back, her brown eyes sparkling in the light of the chandeliers. I didn't immediately understand what exactly hooked me, maybe her lightness, maybe the fact that she looked completely natural among all this corporate fuss. She was tall, about 175 centimeters, with a toned figure and soft feminine curves. Thick dark hair fell in waves over her shoulders, and a light tan only emphasized her expressive facial features. She had a thin waist and ample breasts, but at the same time her posture and demeanor spoke of inner confidence and not of ostentatious beauty. "Who is this?" I asked Tom, a colleague standing next to me. "Oh, this is Anna. By the way, she is 34 years old. She works in the marketing department. She only recently came to us, but everyone has already fallen in love with her." He grinned. Anna, a name that was instantly remembered. She looked as if the whole world belonged to her, and at the same time did not attach any importance to it. I found myself unable to take my eyes off her. At some point, she turned in my direction, and our eyes met. She raised her eyebrows slightly, as if studying me. I chuckled and raised my glass to greet her. Anna, without looking away, smiled slightly, and then, to my surprise, she herself took the first step. "You look like this evening is the most boring event of your life," she said, stopping next to me. "You're observant." "Is it that obvious?" I asked, trying to hide my smile. "More than that. But don't worry, I'm here under duress too. Although I have a theory, evenings like this might not be so bad if you find the right company." Her voice was confident, but there was a slight playfulness in it. I liked the way she held herself, as if she was testing me. We started talking, and the conversation flowed by itself. "Jake, have you decided to have fun after all?" A malicious voice suddenly rang out from behind me. I turned to see Mark Rivers, who was watching us with a grin, his arms crossed over his chest. His presence was so unexpected that Anna frowned slightly. "Mark, it's good to see you," I said, not hiding my irony. "Likewise," he grinned, then turned to Anna. "You must be new. I hope Jake hasn't told you a bunch of stories about how irreplaceable he is." Anna raised an eyebrow and looked at me. "Not yet, but if there's anything I should know, could you share it?" "Oh, trust me, Yao'll find out later," Mark pretended to joke, but I knew his tone very well. He never missed an opportunity to throw in a taunt. I grinned, not wanting to be provoked. "Be that as it may, Mark, I'm sure Anna herself will figure out who is worth listening to." Rivers chuckled, took one last look at us, and, shrugging his shoulders, left. No tension, no awkward pauses. It seemed like we had known each other for a long time. I didn't even notice how the evening came to an end. Colleagues began to leave, the waiters were clearing tables, but we were still talking. About books, about travel, about life. "So, corporate parties aren't so boring?" she asked as I walked her to the exit. "I think this one was an exception," I admitted. Anna laughed and paused at the door for a second. "Then maybe we can repeat it." Her gaze was open, but there was clearly expectation in it. I didn't hesitate, necessarily. After that evening, we began to communicate more often. At first, these were short conversations in the office, a few words during a break, casually crossing glances in the corridors. then joint lunches, casual meetings after work. It seemed that everything was developing naturally without haste or unnecessary stress. One day, Anna invited me to an exhibition of contemporary art. I wasn't a big fan of these types of events, but her enthusiasm was infectious. Am just warning you, if there are canvases on which there's just a black square, am not responsible for my comments, I joked when we met at the entrance to the gallery. Jake, just because you don't like art doesn't mean it's bad. It just means you have bad taste, Anna retorted, smiling slyly. The exhibition really turned out to be strange. We stopped in front of a huge canvas on which colored spots were randomly scattered. Are you sure this was drawn by a person and not a child with paints? I asked skeptically. You don't understand anything. Anna crossed her arms over her chest. This is a reflection of the artist's inner chaos. Definitely had chaos, and not only internally. I nodded at the signature with the price of the painting, barely holding back my laughter. We laughed a lot, discussed the paintings, and even argued about the meaning of one of them. I caught myself thinking that next to Anna, I was truly interested. Time passed, and we became closer. Sometimes it was very small, a casual touch of hands, an exchange of jokes, a slight concern for each other. But it was precisely in such little things that the emerging intimacy was manifested. One day, after a particularly difficult day at work, I decided to invite Anna to dinner. Today was just a nightmare, I exhaled, picking up my coat. I think I urgently need something tasty and a strong drink. Are you with me? A strong drink sounds tempting, Anna grinned, but only if you choose a place. We found ourselves in a small, cozy bar with soft lighting and unobtrusive music. Conversations flowed easily until Anna suddenly fell silent, looking at me. Jake, I haven't met a person with whom I could feel so at ease in a long time, she admitted, looking into my eyes. I smiled, realizing that I felt the same. That's because I'm so damn charming, I winked. Anna laughed, shaking her head. You can be unbearable, but there's something special about it. We didn't leave for a long time, finishing our drinks and discussing everything under the sun. That evening, I realized that I really felt good next to Anna. It was the beginning of something new, something I was not ready for, but which I no longer wanted to avoid. It was a normal evening until everything went wrong. Anna and I agreed to meet after work, but she was late. I was about to write to her when the phone rang. Jake, her voice was tense. It seems to me that someone is following me. I instantly became wary. Where are you? I decided to take a shortcut through the alley next to Central, but now I think it was a mistake. Don't stop, go to a crowded place, I said, already leaving the cafe. I'm coming to see you. Okay, but... Her voice trembled. He sped up. Crap. I ran. Central was only a few blocks away, but every step seemed like an eternity. In the distance, I noticed Anna, her quick step, her gaze full of fear, and a man in a hood relentlessly following her. Hey, I shouted, attracting attention. The man hesitated, then stopped. Anna rushed towards me and grabbed my hand. I stood between her and the pursuer, looking straight into his face. Any problems? My voice was even, but everything was boiling inside. The stranger paused for a moment, then turned and disappeared into the alley. We stood in silence until Anna squeezed my hand. You're on time, she said, breathing heavily. I walked her home without letting go of her hand. That night, I realized I would never let anything happen to her. Anna rarely talked about her past, but over time I learned more about her. One evening, sitting at my house with a glass of wine, she suddenly said, You know almost nothing about me, do you? Well, besides the fact that you love art and know how to argue about tastes, I chuckled. But tell me, I'm interested. She thought for a second and then began to speak. Anna was born in Boston and was the only child in the family. Her father was a philosophy teacher and her mother was a successful lawyer. A strict but intellectually rich atmosphere always reigned in their house. At dinners, they discussed politics, literature, and ethics, and on weekends, instead of games, she was taken to museums and theaters. Do you think this sounds boring? She asked. No, it's just different, I admitted. Anna's childhood was ideal at first glance, but she always felt that she had to live up to her parents' high expectations. She graduated from high school with honors, went to Harvard, but as she admitted, she was always looking for an opportunity to escape from this ideal image. That's why I went traveling after college, she said, smiling. The parents were horrified. They wanted me to start building a career right away. She spent 2 years traveling around Europe, working in small galleries and sometimes just for the sake of experience in cafes and shops. It was the best period of my life, she admitted. I finally felt like I could be myself. But one day she had to return. Her father fell ill and Anna left everything to be by his side. After his death, she settled in Chicago and began a new chapter of her life. And then you appeared, she added, looking into my eyes. But you already know about this. Our relationship with Anna developed naturally, as if we had always been close. We spent more and more time together, learning about each other's little habits that make a person truly close. She knew I couldn't stand iced coffee, and I realized that Anna couldn't stand it when people left kitchen cabinets open. At some point, it became clear that it was time to meet my parents. The first thing I had to meet was her mother. Her father, unfortunately, died several years ago, but Anna spoke about him with great warmth. "I'll warn you right away, my mother is a lawyer," Anna said with a sly smile. "She knows how to ask questions in such a way that you don't even understand how you ended up under interrogation." I was nervous, but the meeting went better than I expected. Her mother, Margaret, was an elegant and strict woman, but there was genuine interest in her eyes. "So you work in consulting?" she asked at dinner. "Yes, I deal with the problems that companies create for themselves," I answered. "So you're good at reading people?" she clarified, and I realized that the test had begun. We talked about work, about family, even about the books we loved as children. At the end of the evening, Margaret looked at Anna and then at me. "I like you, Jake," she said, "but if you break her heart, you better get a good lawyer first." Later, the moment came when I had to introduce Anna to my parents. My parents were the polar opposites of her family, simple, warm people who valued honesty and good deeds more than status or career achievements. My mother immediately hugged Anna, as if she had known her all her life, and my father simply said, "Jake, if you hurt her, I will root for her in court." Anna laughed, and the tension instantly disappeared. But with my brother, Brian, things weren't so smooth. He was married with a 6-year-old son, and he always took the role of big brother too seriously. He was 5 years older than me, and always considered it his duty to give unsolicited advice. When Anna and I first came to visit him, he greeted us with cold politeness. His wife, Sarah, on the other hand, was welcoming and immediately took Anna under her wing, offering tea and conversation while Brian carefully studied me and my companion. "So are you the same Anna?" he said, crossing his arms over his chest. "Jake told me a lot about you." "I hope only good things," Anna smiled, holding out her hand. Brian shook her hand, but his gaze remained searching. "Well, see," he muttered, sitting down at the table. At dinner, he asked Anna direct questions about her past, career, plans for the future. He was clearly trying to figure out how serious she was about me. "And what did you like so much about my brother?" he finally asked with narrowed eyes. Anna looked at me, then smiled. "He makes me laugh, and he always comes to the rescue when needed. I think that's enough already." Brian didn't answer right away, but I noticed the corners of his lips twitch in a hint of a smile. He may not have wanted to show it, but Anna made an impression on him. When we left, he walked me to the door and said quietly, "Okay, brother, maybe she's not bad, but if she hurts you, you know where to find me." That evening, I realized that our lives were gradually intertwining together, and it felt damn good. Our wedding could hardly be called lavish, but it was exactly what we wanted it to be: warm, cozy, and full of smiles. We chose a small ceremony on the coast, surrounded only by our closest loved ones. Anna looked stunning in a simple but elegant dress, and I just couldn't stop smiling. "Are you sure you haven't changed your mind?" she whispered as we stood in front of the priest. "I would sooner change my mind about breathing," I replied, making her laugh. After the ceremony, we did not have a magnificent banquet, but simply went to a small restaurant by the ocean, where everyone felt at home. However, when everyone had already relaxed, the door suddenly opened and Mark entered the hall. Nobody invited him, but that didn't seem to bother him. Well, what a nice family atmosphere," he drawled, looking around at those present with an appraising look. Anna squeezed my hand under the table, and Brian frowned, clearly ready to stand up and throw out the intruder. "Mark, it seems you forgot to check your mailbox," I said coldly. "Come on, Jake, you didn't think I'd pass up this opportunity, did you?" He chuckled. "I'd like to personally wish you good luck. You know you're going to need it." There was tension in the air, but before I could respond, Anna leaned forward and said with a smile, "Thank you, Mark. And now, if you don't mind, we will continue our evening without your participation." Mark grinned, took one last look at us, and, shrugging his shoulders, turned around and left. Brian snorted. "What a bastard." But Anna, it was masterful. We laughed and the tension dissipated, but I remembered this moment for a long time. Even on the happiest days, the past reminded itself of itself. Brian, to my surprise, was unusually friendly and even made a toast in which he openly admitted for the first time that he was happy for me. "Okay, Jake, you're in good hands now. Anna, if he starts being stubborn, just call me," he said with a wink. A couple of days after the wedding, we went on a trip. We spent a long time choosing where to go, but in the end, we settled on Italy. We wanted to see the ancient streets of Rome, enjoy the Tuscan vineyards, and just get lost in the atmosphere of small towns where no one knew us. "Jake, I've never eaten so much pasta in one day," Anna said, sitting across from me in a small family restaurant somewhere in Venice. "Well, if this is a problem, then I'm ready to take part of the responsibility on myself," I answered, stealing the fork with carbonara from her. We wandered the streets, took boat rides along the canals, and one night we just sat on the bridge, listening to the city go to sleep. It was the perfect start to our married life. "Let's stay here," Anna suggested jokingly, looking at the water. "Come on," I replied, "at least for a couple more days." Night fell over the city, hiding it in soft darkness. Their hotel room was dim, lit only by the warm glow of the bedside lamp. Anna stood by the window, slightly shaking her glass of wine, and I just looked at her, feeling the tension growing inside. She was amazing. Her hair fell in soft waves onto her shoulders, and there was challenge and desire in her eyes. I came closer and ran my fingers along her bare back, feeling the warmth of her skin. She shuddered slightly, but did not move away. Instead, she turned to me, her lips parted, and I couldn't hold back any longer. Our kiss was long, intense, as if we had been waiting for this moment for all eternity. "You have no idea how long I've wanted this," she whispered, sliding her hands over my chest. "You have no idea how long I held back," I replied, running my tongue along her neck and feeling her breathing quicken. The clothes disappeared from us slowly, with a lazy languor, as if we were savoring every touch. I ran my lips over her shoulder, then lower, leaving warm trails of kisses. Anna arched in my arms, her nails dug into my back, and her every movement only fueled my desire more. "Jake," her voice was hoarse and full of impatience, "don't torture me." I picked her up, and she wrapped her legs around my hips, greedily sucking my lips. I laid her on the bed, covering her with my body, feeling her warmth enveloping me. When our bodies finally merged together, the world around us disappeared. All that was left was she and I, our moans, a tangle of hot touches, a ragged rhythm that took our breath away. She bit her lip, her eyes darkening with pleasure. "Fuck," she moaned, arching forward. "You're driving me crazy." "You've already driven me crazy," I answered hoarsely, increasing the pace. Everything was perfect, her lips, her curves, her movements, full of passion and desire. We gave each other completely, exploring, feeling, pushing each other to the limit. When it was all over, Anna pressed herself against me, her fingers lazily sliding over my chest. She smiled, her breathing gradually evening out. "If it's always like this," she whispered, "then I've definitely made the right choice." I chuckled, pulling her closer. "That was just the beginning, darling. We want sleep tonight." Our first year of marriage was almost perfect. We enjoyed every moment cooking dinner together, watching old movies, going on spontaneous weekend trips. Anna was not just a wife for me, but a real-life partner, a person with whom I could laugh until I cried and discuss anything, from politics to stupid internet memes. "Jake, we're terrible," she said one night, lying on the couch. "We could be at your boss's dinner party right now, but instead we're sitting in our pajamas eating pizza." "First of all, we have excellent pajamas," I objected, taking a bite. "And secondly, we have pizza. I think we just made the best choice." But the further time passed, the more nuances appeared that we had to deal with. We both worked in the same company, but in different directions. I was involved in strategic analysis, and Anna was in marketing. Her job required constant communication, meetings and presentations, and sometimes it seemed to me that her career was taking up more and more space in her life. I didn't blame her, she was always ambitious, and I admired her determination. She sincerely loved her work and invested all her time and effort into it. Late calls, meetings after work, unexpected business trips, all this gradually became the norm for her. "Are you sitting at your laptop again?" I asked one day, leaning against the door frame of the bedroom. "Jake, I have an important meeting tomorrow," she replied, without even looking up. "It won't take long." But time was running out. Sometimes she would come home late at night, exhausted but with a sparkle of excitement in her eyes, telling me about a new project or a successful deal. "You have no idea how this turned out," she said, throwing off her coat and sitting down next to him. "It was a risk, but it was worth it. I feel like I'm really doing something important." I nodded, smiled, supported her, but inside there was a strange feeling that something was changing. Perhaps it was the usual everyday routine that inevitably comes in any relationship, or maybe I just missed it as much as before. The problems seemed small, but I knew that if I didn't pay attention to them, they could grow into something bigger. We still loved each other, but it seemed that our lives were gradually turning into a series of familiar rituals in which there was less surprise, spontaneity, and the fire that was at the very beginning. The night turned out to be hot and lazy. Anna lay spread out on the sheets, her skin still retaining warmth after the passionate minutes spent together. I slid my hand around her waist, pulling her closer. She smiled lazily without opening her eyes. "You look pleased," I chuckled. "Did you doubt it?" Her voice was a little hoarse after a stormy night. We lay in silence for a little longer, enjoying the closeness until I decided to speak. "Anna, have you ever thought about children?" I asked carefully. She slowly opened her eyes, her gaze sliding over my face, and then she sighed and pulled away, turning over onto her back. "Do you want to talk about it now?" There was slight irritation in her voice. "And when," I answered softly, I have been thinking about this for a long time. We have been married for 3 years now, and it seems like now is the time." Anna was silent. Then she slowly shook her head. "Jake, am not sure I want children. At least not right now." I frowned, propping myself up on my elbow. "Why? You didn't say before that you were against it." "I don't mind, but I have so much in my life. Work, projects. Am just not ready to change everything right now." "Is a child necessarily something that changes everything?" I tried to speak calmly, but anxiety was already beginning to grow inside. Anna grinned. "Of course, it changes. You do understand that if we have a child, my career will pause. It's not as simple as you think." I ran my hand over my face, trying to find the right words. "But you can always find a balance. Isn't that what family is all about? Let's get through this together." "Jake, you're a good husband, but you're an idealist." Anna sat down, hugging her knees with her hands. "I just want a little more time. 5 years, maybe." 5 years? I couldn't contain my surprise. "You said you wanted an honest answer. Here it is." She looked at me point blank. Are you angry? I sighed, looking at the ceiling. No, I wasn't angry. Disappointed, perhaps. But I couldn't make her want something she wasn't ready for. No, I finally answered. It's just, I was hoping that we would think about this together. Anna reached out to me and ran her fingers over my cheek. I love you, Jake, but I don't want to rush. Let's just live for ourselves, at least for now. I nodded, but deep down I understood that this conversation was not over yet. Several weeks passed after our conversation about the child, but the topic remained in the air. We both avoided her, as if we were afraid to get into an argument again. It seemed that everything remained the same. Work, home, rare weekends together, but it seemed to me that a thin, almost imperceptible crack had appeared between us. One day Anna suggested going on a short weekend trip, something like a reboot for both of us. We chose a mountain hut a few hours' drive from the city. It should have been simple nature, wine, no work, and, most importantly, no talk about the future. But already on the first night, I realized that we had accumulated too many unsaid things. We were sitting by the fireplace, drinking red wine, when Anna suddenly said, "You're still mad at me, right?" I put the glass on the table. No, am not angry. Just trying to understand what you really want, Anna. She looked into the fire and then turned sharply to me. What if I don't know myself? What if I just want to live as I am now for a few more years? Is this bad? It's bad when one of us wants more and the other lives for today, I answered irritably. I don't understand why we can't just move forward. Anna frowned. Move forward? You sound like I'm slowing down your life. Isn't it? I burst out. It seems to me that I'm always waiting for you to finally decide what you want. I wait all the time. She set her glass down so abruptly that the wine almost spilled. So now it's my fault that I don't want a child right now. Do you even hear what you're saying? I hear you, Anna. I raised my voice. I hear that your career, your freedom, and your few years are more important than what we are building together. She pursed her lips and stood up, walking around the table. Maybe because you don't understand what this means for me. You want me to give up everything for a hypothetical future. Do you want me to give up my dream of a family for the sake of your uncertainty? I blurted out. We stood opposite each other, breathing heavily. The tension in the air could be cut with a knife. It seemed like this trip was supposed to bring us closer together, but instead it presented us with a question to which neither of us knew the answer. After that trip, we never brought up the topic of children again. The quarrel left a bad taste, but neither of us wanted to continue this conversation. It seemed easier to pretend that nothing had happened. Anna acted as if everything was fine. She plunged back into work, returning home late, and I learned not to ask unnecessary questions. After all, if she's not ready, what can I do? I told myself that I had come to terms with it. He said that we have everything we need: love, home, stability. Why rush her? But deep down, I couldn't help but think that one day she would change her mind. That one day she herself will bring up this conversation, look at me with a smile and say, "You know, I'm ready." One evening, we were sitting in the living room, a rare moment when Anna was not busy with work. She was lazily scrolling through her phone feed when suddenly the screen flickered and a message arrived. At that same moment, her face changed. She frowned, quickly locked the screen, and put the phone aside, but I managed to notice how her fingers clenched into a fist for a second. "Everything is fine?" I asked, trying to speak calmly. "Yes, of course," she answered too quickly, without looking at me. "Just work. Next urgent questions." I knew her too well. It wasn't just a job. There was nervousness in her voice and tension in her movements. "Maybe you want to discuss?" I suggested. "No," she answered shortly and stood up, heading to the kitchen. "I'll make some tea. Should I pour you some?" I just nodded, watching her leave, but the feeling of anxiety did not leave me. What was this message? And why didn't she want to tell me the truth? I couldn't say that at any particular moment everything changed. It happened gradually, like a crack in glass, which is barely noticeable at first, but becomes larger every day. Anna spent more and more time at work, and when she was at home, her thoughts were clearly somewhere far away. We talked less, laughed less. Her phone became something of a lifeline for her, to which she clung at any inconvenient moment. Sometimes I felt like I was living with a person I no longer knew. One evening, sitting on the sofa with a glass of whiskey, I found myself watching her. She was standing by the window, talking to someone on the phone. A quiet voice, a slight smile, not the one that was previously intended only for me. "You came late again today," I said when she finally hung up. "Yes, sorry, I'm stuck at work," she replied without turning around. "Are you sure this is just work?" Irritation slipped into my voice, but I tried not to show how much it bothered me. She looked over her shoulder at me, frowning. "What else could it be, Jake?" Her voice was tired, but there was a defensive note in it. I shrugged, taking a sip. "I'm just asking. You're either in the office or on the phone all the time. Sometimes it seems to me that I am in the background for you." She sighed heavily, came up to me, and sat down next to me. "I need to focus on my career. Aren't you glad I have ambition? Don't you support me?" I looked at her. Of course I was happy. Of course I supported it. But at what point did our dreams become so different? "I support you, Anna. Always. It just seems to me that we has become something secondary." She pursed her lips, stood up, and went into the bedroom without answering. That night, I lay in the dark for a long time, listening to the clock tick, and for the first time I thought, what if everything is really going wrong? Work has always been something we have in common. Anna and I worked in the same company, although in different departments, but now it seemed that our paths at work almost did not intersect. She became increasingly absorbed in her projects, and I tried not to interfere, but at some point I wanted to see her at least during the day. I decided to stop by her department under the pretext that I needed to discuss a corporate event. When I walked in, the first thing that caught my eye was Anna standing at her desk and Mark leaning next to her. He said something to her, leaning forward slightly, and she laughed, lightly touching his hand. I froze. Something inside me clenched unpleasantly. "Jake?" Anna's voice brought me back to reality. She noticed me and smiled, but in her gaze there was surprise mixed with slight concern. "Hello," I said, trying to speak evenly. "I think we need to discuss the upcoming corporate party." Mark lazily straightened up and grinned. "Oh, Jake, are you showing up in our department now? What a rarity." His voice was as malicious as always. Anna gave him a warning look, but said nothing. I took a step closer, feeling the irritation growing inside me. "I just wanted to make sure my wife wasn't working too much," I chuckled, trying to hide the tension. Mark chuckled and crossed his arms over his chest. "Well, of course, what would it be like without you, Jake? Always on guard." He glanced sideways at Anna. "But don't you think you're worrying too much? Anna is an adult. She knows how to manage her own time." "I know," I answered, looking straight into his eyes. "But as far as I remember, you are not one of her bosses. Or has something changed?" Anna sighed and stood between us. "That's enough," she said firmly, glancing first at me, then at Mark. "You both act like teenagers." "Just a friendly conversation, Anna," Mark grinned. "I didn't know your husband was so jealous." I clenched my jaw, but refrained from answering. Instead, I gave Anna a quick glance. "We'll discuss everything later. Don't be late, okay?" Anna nodded, but I saw that this conversation tired her. I left her department, but the feeling of anxiety was firmly lodged in my head. Something was wrong here, and I couldn't shake that feeling. I can't say exactly when everything changed. It may have happened gradually, but one day I just realized I no longer felt like an important part of her life. Anna stopped noticing little things. She was no longer interested in how my day was going or asked about the projects I was working on. And when I tried to tell something, her attention invariably switched to the phone or to something else that seemed more meaningful to her. But most of all, it was the small, subtle humiliations that finished me off. "You're so over-analytical, Jake," she said when I tried to discuss our relationship. "Sometimes I think you just can't relax." "Jake, you are not jealous, are you? That's so stupid." We just work together. I tried not to pay attention, attributing everything to stress and her busyness. But then it got worse. At a company event, I noticed her laughing at something Mark said, lightly touching his shoulder. Their gazes lingered on each other a little longer than I would have liked. I couldn't resist and came closer. "Something fun?" I asked, trying to speak calmly. Anna smiled, but a shadow of irritation flashed in her eyes. "Just a work moment, Jake. Relax," she said, slapping me on the shoulder ironically, as if I were a child causing a scene for no reason. Mark grinned. "Yes, Jake, you're too tense. Maybe you should take a little break from work." His voice was saturated with self-satisfaction. I felt something inside me shrink. I didn't answer anything, not here, not in front of everyone. The corporate business was gaining momentum. The alcohol flowed freely, the music became louder, and laughter was heard everywhere. Anna had never been a big drinker, but this evening she clearly relaxed. I watched as she easily accepted another glass of champagne, laughed at her colleagues' jokes, and carefreely exchanged words with Mark. At first glance, everything was innocent. But the more she drank, the more relaxed her speech became, the less she cared about what she said and to whom. "Jake, you're so." Anna paused, then giggled and waved her hand. "So serious, always so proper. You know, sometimes I think you don't know how to have fun at all." I tensed, but smiled, trying not to stir up conflict. "Someone just has to keep the balance," I replied. "Oh, of course, Mr. Responsibility," she grinned, shaking the glass in her hand. "God, sometimes it seems to me that I am married to an accountant and not to a man." Mark, sitting next to him, snorted, clearly enjoying the moment. "Well, Jake, you understand that Anna is just relaxing," he said with a grin. I ignored him and turned to Anna. "I think it's time for you to stop," I said quietly, trying to sound calm. She rolled her eyes. "Don't start. Come on, tell me that I'm behaving inappropriately." She made her voice rougher, parodying me. "Jake, you know how much I love you, but damn, sometimes you're just a bore." I felt a slight wave of awkward silence sweep through the hall. Colleagues exchanged glances, someone giggled, but I was not laughing. Mark suddenly chuckled and leaned closer to me. "Maybe you should give her a break, Jake," he said mockingly. "It seems like your wife only has fun when you're not around." I clenched my fists. He said this on purpose to offend. I took a deep breath, trying not to break down, but when he added, "Maybe she just needs someone who understands her desires better than you." I couldn't stand it. The blow came quickly and sharply right into Mark's jaw. He stumbled back, but immediately rushed at me, and we fell onto the nearest table with a roar. People around screamed, someone tried to separate us, but at that moment I only heard the roar in my ears and saw his smug face. "Jake, stop it." Anna ran up and grabbed my hand, but I remained in a fighting stance for a few more seconds. Finally, I broke away from the crowd, wiping the blood from my lip, and took the glass from her hands, setting it aside. "It's time to go home, Anna," I said firmly. She wanted to object, but from my tone she realized that there was no point in arguing. I helped her up and led her to the exit. On the way home, she was silent, and I felt anger, resentment, and disappointment seething inside me. The drive home passed in tense silence. Anna sat with her face turned to the window, and I gripped the steering wheel tighter, trying to calm down. My fist still hurt from the blow, my head was buzzing with rage, but what irritated me most of all was her behavior. Laughter, flirtatious glances, Mark. All this could not leave my head. When we entered the apartment, Anna was the first to break the silence. "Do you really think this circus was necessary?" Her voice sounded tired, but there was no anger in it. "Are you serious?" I turned sharply to her. "Did you even hear what he said? Or were you satisfied with everything?" Anna sighed, came closer, and slid her palms over my chest. "Jake," her voice trailed off, "let's not fight. You look so damn sexy when you're angry." I frowned, but she was already slowly taking my jacket off, then loosening my tie. Her hands deftly unbuttoned the buttons on her shirt, and in her eyes there was something that I had not seen before: hunger, passion, desire. "Anna, what are you?" Before I could finish speaking, she knelt down in front of me and ran her fingers through the waistband of my trousers. "HHH," she whispered, not taking her eyes off me. "Let me make amends." I inhaled sharply, feeling a shiver run through my body. Never before had she been so bold, so daring. We have always been passionate in bed, but today it was something different. Her hot breath touched my skin, making me shiver. She acted confidently, greedily, as if she knew what she wanted and exactly how to drive me crazy. My fingers got tangled in her hair, but a strange thought flashed through my head. Anna had never before shown such initiative in giving pleasure. Usually I was the initiator, leading the process, but now she took control into her own hands, and it confused me. Where does this confidence come from? Why today? I cast aside my doubts, allowing myself to lose myself in the sensations. Her lips, movements, every light cascade of kisses on the inside of her thighs, all this was a new, previously unknown level of pleasure. But somewhere in the back of my mind, there was a feeling that something had changed, and I wasn't sure whether I liked it or not. When she stood up and looked at me with eyes full of desire, I could not resist and grabbed her, pressing her to me. This night promised to be long, but the questions that arose in my head did not disappear. They remained there like smoldering coals, ready to flare up at any moment. The morning after the corporate party turned out to be painful. Anna was still sleeping. Her breathing was even calm, as if nothing had happened. I lay with my eyes open, looking at the ceiling, replaying the events of the previous night in my head. Her words, her laughter, Mark. All this is stuck inside, like a splinter that cannot be pulled out. It hurt me, but what made me even more angry was that I didn't say anything when I should have. I just let her humiliate me in front of everyone, let Mark smirk, let her feel like a fool. I got out of bed, trying not to wake her, and went into the living room. I made myself some strong coffee, sat down on the sofa, and just stared at the wall. A storm was raging in my chest, but I didn't know how to throw it out. The phone vibrated. Message from Brian. "Brian, how are you, brother? I heard that there was a circus yesterday." I grimaced as I typed my answer. Fine. "Brian, nonsense. You need to speak out." I thought about it. Should I speak out? What's the point? What will I say? That my wife acts like I'm nothing to her. That she flirts with Mark and then pretends it never happened. That I feel helpless. I erased the text I had typed and wrote instead. "I'll come by in the evening." I spent the whole day on automatic. Work, meetings, papers, all this was just the background. There was a feeling of injustice inside me, but I didn't know how to deal with it. Anna, of course, wrote me a couple of messages, but I didn't answer right away. Let him think a little. When I arrived at Brian's in the evening, he greeted me silently, but his look said everything. We sat down in the kitchen, he poured us a glass of whiskey, and just waited for me to talk. She humiliated me in front of everyone, I finally exhaled, and then she acted as if nothing had happened. Brian nodded. "Did you tell her about this?" I shook my head. "No, she just dragged me into bed, and I stopped myself, knowing how it sounded." Brian exhaled heavily. "Damn it, Jake. You shouldn't let her wipe her feet on you. Are you a man or what?" I was silent, gritting my teeth. "Either you talk to her, or you keep eating that crap until you explode. You don't deserve to be treated like that." I knew he was right. But the question was different. Am I ready to hear the truth if I finally ask Anna all these questions? I have always believed that trust is the foundation of any relationship. Yes, Anna and I had difficulties, but I never questioned her loyalty. Until recently. The first crack appeared unnoticed. She was increasingly late at work, explaining this with urgent projects. I tried not to attach any importance, but every day her messages became shorter and her calls became less frequent. One evening, when she finally came home, I noticed something strange. She walked into the apartment, quickly kissed me on the cheek, and immediately headed to the bathroom, holding the phone in her hand. I heard the sound of an incoming message, but when I happened to look into the corridor, I saw her holding the screen to her chest, as if hiding it from me. Who wrote? I asked, trying to speak calmly. Nobody, just work moments, she answered too quickly, without looking me in the eye. I felt a slight chill down my back. This was not true. The next day at work, I was approached by Tom, one of the colleagues with whom I sometimes had lunch. Jake, listen, I don't mean to interrupt, but... He hesitated, looking around. Are you sure Anna is okay? In what sense? I was wary. She's just acting strange. He often leaves the office, saying that it's for work, but, somehow everything is too often. I also saw her nervously hide her phone a couple of times when someone passed by. I frowned. Are you saying she's cheating on me? I asked emphatically. Tom raised his hands in a conciliatory gesture. No, I'm not saying anything. He lowered his voice. I'm not. It's just. Haven't you noticed that she's changed? Withdrawn? I remember how you always left work together, but now she's always gone, always busy. I sighed heavily. Of course I noticed. But it's one thing to suspect something within yourself, and another thing to hear it from the outside. Maybe I'm just stressing myself out, I muttered. Tom shook his head. Listen, buddy, I don't want you to regret later that you closed your eyes to everything. Just be more careful. Maybe it's just stress, or maybe, he paused. In any case, it is better to know the truth than to live in an illusion. I nodded, but a feeling of anxiety firmly settled inside. Now I could no longer ignore these hints. I never thought that one day I would have to discuss such things with my mother. But when doubts began to eat away at me from the inside, I realized that I could no longer keep it to myself. I needed someone who would listen, who would tell me I wasn't going crazy. In the evening, I went to see my mother. She lived in a small house on the outskirts of the city, cozy and warm, as always. She immediately realized that something was wrong with me. Jake, dear, did something happen? She asked, pouring us tea. I took the mug, but didn't even take a sip. He sighed and ran his hand over his face, trying to find words. Mom, I think Anna is cheating on me. Mom froze, put the kettle on the stove, and sat down opposite me. There was no condemnation in her eyes, only concern. She looked at me carefully and then took my hand. Why do you think so? She asked softly. I smiled bitterly. Because she became different, I muttered. She often stays late, avoids conversations, is constantly on her phone. And yesterday Tom said that she behaves strangely at work. He hides, goes out somewhere. Mom frowned. Have you talked to her about this? Her voice was soft, but there was an urgency in it. I shook my head. No, not yet. I'm afraid to hear the truth, Mom. What if I'm wrong? What if it's just my jealousy and I destroy what we have? She squeezed my hand tighter. Jake, son, I know one thing. When a man has a clear conscience, he doesn't hide. You know, I had a hard time growing up, and I've seen plenty of people try to hide the truth. You know it for a reason. I clenched my jaw, feeling something heavy boiling inside me. I don't want to believe it, Mom. I love her. My voice broke, and I ran a hand through my hair in exasperation. But I don't know what the hell is left between us anymore. Mom sighed and pursed her lips, as if searching for words. Trust is the basis of marriage. But if you don't trust anymore, you need to talk to her. You cannot live in this state, constantly tormenting yourself with doubts. If you're right, you need to know. If you are wrong, you should know too. I nodded, but that same fear was still sitting in my chest. Fear that, having looked into the eyes of the truth, I will no longer be able to reject it. What if I don't like the answer? I asked quietly. Mom looked at me for a long time and then simply said, Then you will have to decide how to live further. Because the worst thing is to live in illusion. Mom sighed, her fingers lightly tapping the edge of the cup. I saw her gaze cloud for a moment, as if she had returned to some distant memory. You know, Jake, she began quietly, I never told you this, but your father and I also had difficult times. I looked up at her, surprised. My parents always seemed like an ideal couple to me, loving, understanding, the one who goes through everything together. It never occurred to me that they, too, might have serious problems. "What do you mean?" I asked, putting down the mug. She smiled, but there was something bitter in her eyes. "It was a long time ago, long before you were born and even before Brian. Your father and I had just gotten married, and he worked day and night. It seemed to me that I was losing him, that his world was narrowing to work and colleagues, and I was just somewhere on the periphery." I frowned. There was something very familiar in her words. "Was he moving away from you?" I asked quietly. "Not on purpose," she shook her head. "But yes, he had always been an honest person, but I began to notice that he stopped sharing with me, became absent-minded, and was often late. And one day, when he returned late at night, I decided to ask directly." I held my breath. "And what did he say?" She grinned. "He looked at me and said, 'I'm afraid I'll disappoint you.' I didn't understand what he meant, but then he admitted that he felt pressure to provide for his family, to live up to my expectations, to be strong, and work was the only way he could prove to himself that he could cope. He wasn't cheating on me, he just didn't know how to talk about his weakness." I was silent, thinking about her words. They resonated with something inside me, with my own fears and doubts. "Jake, sometimes our fears blind us," my mother continued. "You're afraid of the truth, but it's important to understand, are you afraid of what might happen or what has already happened? Because if it's already happening, then it's up to you to decide what to do next. But you can't run from it." I clenched my jaw, digesting her words. She didn't give me ready answers, but she made me think, and perhaps that's what I needed right now. After talking to my mom, I decided that maybe I had really screwed myself up. All these small suspicions could simply be a consequence of fatigue, stress, and my own fears. Anna was always dedicated to her work, and perhaps I was overreacting to her busyness. To make amends for my own doubts, I decided to surprise her. It's been a while since we spent time together, so I booked dinner at her favorite restaurant and prepared a small gift, an engraved silver bracelet that I saw in the store a couple of weeks ago. When Anna returned from work, I greeted her with a glass of wine and a slight smile. "What is this?" she asked in surprise, taking off her coat. "I just wanted to do you a favor," I said, handing her a small box. "We haven't been out together in a while." Anna smiled, but I noticed something like anxiety in her eyes, as if she didn't expect this. "Jake, this is so unexpected." She opened the box, and a smile touched her lips. "It's very beautiful." "Then put it on, and let's go to the restaurant." I softly kissed her temple. She nodded, but before going into the bedroom to change, she quickly glanced at her phone and made a message. I forced myself to ignore it. This evening was supposed to be perfect, and I wanted to believe that all my suspicions were in vain. After dinner, we returned home, and as soon as we crossed the threshold, Anna suddenly pulled me towards her, running her fingers through my hair. Her kiss was greedy, assertive, not at all like usual. I felt her breathing become ragged and her hands impatiently undoing the buttons on my shirt. "What's wrong with you today?" I whispered as her lips slid towards my ear. "You tried so hard this evening," she breathed, biting me lightly on the neck. "I want to thank you." I didn't ask any unnecessary questions. Her dress slipped to the floor, leaving her in front of me in only her lacy lingerie. She ran her hands over my chest, then slid lower, and I felt a wave of desire cover me. We found ourselves on the bed, our bodies merged into a single impulse, filled with hunger and passion. Anna was tireless, she moved boldly, her movements were unusually bold and defiant. Her nails left marks on my back, and her lips did not give a second of respite. "Damn, Anna," I moaned, squeezing her hips. She just grinned, turning me over onto my back and leaning towards my ear. "Relax, I'm driving today." I began to notice his name in Anna's conversation more and more often. At first, it was just casual. Mark helped with the project. I had lunch with Mark, discussed reports. But then I realized that his presence in her life had become more constant than I would like. Mark. This man has always irritated me, But now it has turned into something more. He was the same colleague who smirked at the office party, the one who always stood too close to Anna, spoke to her a little more quietly than he should have. It all started unnoticed. Anna began going to meetings after work more often, staying late in the evenings, and her phone was always face down. I tried to convince myself that everything was fine, that it was just my fear, but the doubts did not disappear. One day, I accidentally overheard a snippet of conversation in the office. Walking past the kitchen, I caught familiar voices. They are always together. Did you hear them laughing in her office yesterday? Some girl said. Well, to be honest, I wouldn't be surprised if there was something there. A male voice replied. Did you see the way Mark looked at her? I froze. Everything tightened in my chest, but I forced myself to move on, pretending that I had not heard these words. Later in the evening, when Anna said again that she would be staying late in the office, I found myself thinking, what if I just came and checked? What if I see everything with my own eyes? Doubts turned into suspicions, and I was ready to find out the truth. Mark no longer hid his attitude towards me. If earlier his barbs were veiled, now he seemed to take pleasure in humiliating me. In the office, he allowed himself jokes that he would not have dared to say before. Jake, you're so tense, he chuckled one day in the break room, taking another sip of coffee. Maybe you should relax. Sometimes it's good to let go and let your wife live her life. You know what I mean. I clenched my teeth, feeling anger boiling inside. Do you want to say something, Mark? I looked at him, trying to maintain composure. No, he grinned, shaking his head. I just think that living with a successful woman is a challenge, especially when she clearly doesn't miss you. Several of our colleagues were sitting nearby, and someone chuckled quietly. I looked in their direction, but no one dared meet my gaze. At one of the planning meetings, when I was making a report, Mark interrupted me, sighing loudly. Jake, are you serious? It feels like you're giving a freshman economics lecture. Maybe add at least a drop of charisma. Or maybe your wife takes it all while you suffer at home. I clenched my fists under the table. If you're not interested, you can leave, Mark, I said in a level voice. Come on, don't be angry, he grinned, glancing at Anna, who was sitting opposite, and, as if on purpose, did not raise her eyes. We're just discussing. Well, colleagues, friendly banter. Mark, I leaned forward, meeting his gaze. If you have something to say, speak directly. He laughed, leaning closer. Just tell me, Jake, what does it feel like to be a guy who is quietly pushed out of his own marriage? I felt the blood rush to my face. At that moment, I realized Mark was not just mocking. He knew something that I didn't know, and he liked it. I understood that I couldn't figure it all out alone. Mark mocked me openly, Anna was moving away every day, and my own consciousness was tossing between the desire to believe in the best and the fear of knowing the truth. But the more I tried to convince myself that everything was okay, the more anxiety grew. At that moment, Rose appeared. We worked in the same company, but our paths rarely crossed. She was from the finance department, tall, with dark eyes and straight hair, always reserved and attentive. Rose didn't like idle chatter and stayed away from office gossip, but if she noticed something, she didn't ignore it. And most importantly, she couldn't stand Mark. Jake, can I say a few words? One day, she came up to me after work. I nodded, and we went outside, where there were fewer prying ears. The evening air was cool, and Rose pulled a thin cardigan over her shoulders. I saw that she was worried about something. I don't know what's going on between you and Mark, but I don't like the way he acts in the office, she said, adjusting her glasses. And I like it even less that he often stays late at your wife's. I saw them a couple of times after work. My heart beat faster. Where did you see them? The voice sounded hoarse. Rose thought for a moment, as if remembering the details, and then nodded. In a cafe near the office. Once in a parking lot near an office building. They are clearly more than just colleagues, Jake. Am not one to jump to conclusions, but I saw how they communicate. These are not just work conversations. I swallowed, feeling reality shrink around me. The fingers involuntarily clenched into a fist. "Are you sure?" I asked, although I already knew the answer. Rose looked me straight in the eyes. "I've seen enough to tell you one thing. If you want to know the truth, start digging. And if anything, I have access to some records. I can help." I was silent, thinking about her words. On the one hand, this was exactly what I was afraid to hear, but on the other hand, wasn't I looking for confirmation of my guesses? Maybe I was just hoping I was wrong. "Why are you telling me this?" I finally asked. Rose sighed and shrugged. "Because I care. I see how you walk around like you're not yourself, and I see how Mark acts when he thinks no one is looking. This is a dirty game, and if you don't do anything, I'm afraid it will soon be too late." I nodded, but my head was still in chaos. Now I have my first ally. But am I ready to find out the truth? I drove home, replaying the conversation with Rose in my head. Her words sounded convincing, too convincing, but something inside me resisted accepting them. This is just speculation, right? A couple of meetings outside the office, so what? Anna could have discussed work with Mark. They could have crossed paths by chance. Is this a reason for accusations? I gripped the steering wheel tighter. What if I'm needlessly stressing myself out? What if Rose is simply mistaken or has her own motives? Maybe she herself doesn't like Mark and wants to make him look bad. When I went home, Anna was already there. She was sitting on the sofa with a glass of wine, her hair was loose, and fatigue was visible on her face. "You're late," she said, without taking her eyes off the laptop screen. "I was late at work," I answered, going into the kitchen and pouring myself some water. She nodded, taking a sip of wine. I looked at her, trying to see at least something that would confirm my suspicions, but in front of me was just Anna, my wife, the one I knew and loved. How can I trust my colleague's words more than hers? "Everything is fine?" she asked, finally meeting my gaze. I wanted to say that yes, that everything was fine, but something sank inside. "Of course, I'm just tired," I forced out and forced a smile. I decided to put all these thoughts aside. Maybe I'm really in vain looking for problems where there are none. I came closer, sat next to her, and ran my hand along her thigh, trying to feel at least some warmth between us. She sighed and gently removed my hand. "Sorry, I'm very tired," she said quietly, sipping her wine. "Tomorrow is a hard day. I want to go to bed early." I nodded, trying to hide my disappointment. This was not the first time this had happened. Lately, her excuses have become almost habitual. Maybe I'm really screwing myself up, or maybe everything has changed a long time ago. Several weeks passed and life went on as usual. Anna still left early, returned late, smiled at dinner, and sometimes even asked how my day was. I forced myself to believe that this was just a stressful period, that I was really stressing myself out. I continued to live as if nothing had happened, although deep down the anxious feeling did not disappear. I tried to distract myself. I spent more time at the gym, stayed late at work, and socialized with colleagues. But every morning, when I woke up alone in bed and Anna had already disappeared, I felt that something was wrong. We began to sleep apart not only physically, but also emotionally. She sought my company less and less, and I realized too late that I had begun to get used to it. And then, one evening, when I stopped at the grocery store, everything changed. While standing in line, I opened my phone to check my messages and suddenly saw a notification pop up on Anna's screen that accidentally synced with our family cloud. Photo. My breath caught. I clicked on the image, and what I feared most was revealed to me. Anna, half naked, in a bed I've never seen before. In the background was a man's shoulder with a distinctive tattoo that I immediately recognized. Mark. I stared at the screen, but my brain refused to process what I saw. Maybe this is an old photo, some kind of ridiculous prank. I frantically scrolled through the images until I saw the date in the top corner of the screen. 2 days ago. Where was I 2 days ago? We had dinner together and discussed her work. She laughed, said she was tired, and went to bed early. At this time, she was in bed with him. The world froze. People around continued to move, The cashier said something, but I didn't hear. My head was empty, his hands clenched into fists, his fingers turning white. I was thrown into a fever, and then into an icy cold. I forced myself to take a deep breath, and, not remembering myself, left the store. The cold air hit my face, but did not return me to reality. My heart was pounding loudly in my chest, and only one thought was pulsating in my head. How long has this been going on? I got into the car, stared into space, and for the first time in a long time, I felt something new rising inside me. Not just anger, it was something cold, calculating. Now everything will be different. Now the game will begin according to my rules. I exhaled slowly, started the engine, but didn't move. The phone was still in my hand. My heart was pounding dully, as if trying to break my ribs. I looked at the photo again, at her lips parted in a passionate moan, at his hand lying on her thigh. Something snapped inside me. I couldn't go home. Not now. Not to her. I went to another place where I could be alone, where it was possible to realize that my life had just fallen apart, and I could do nothing but watch it fall into pieces. I couldn't just leave it. The photo of Mark in bed with Anna stuck in my head, turning every minute into torture. I needed to know everything. How long has this been going on? Where did they meet? Who else knew about this? I started by checking her phone. No, am not proud of it. But after what I saw, I could no longer trust the words. However, there was nothing suspicious in her messages. Either she deleted the correspondence or used another method of communication. Then I remembered the laptop. Anna rarely left her accounts, and I knew her password. Opening her email, I began looking through messages and login history. And then I found the first confirmation. Letter from the hotel reservation service. The dates coincided with her business trips. I opened the details. The number was in her name, but paid for with a card that I had never seen before. My heart was pounding dully in my chest. This lasted at least 3 months. 3 damn ones. Months. I continued digging. I looked at the statements for our joint accounts, nothing. But her recent transactions included strange charges at bars, restaurants, places we never went together. She hid everything carefully, but not perfectly. I decided to check even deeper. Anna always left her phone charging in the hallway, and I remembered that she had synchronization with the cloud turned on. After logging into her account, I started looking through her message history and found saved backups of conversations that she probably thought she had deleted. Correspondence with Mark. Messages full of passion, jokes, frank confessions. I read how she wrote that she missed him, how she promised to make time for meetings. I saw him ask her if she could get away again for a couple of hours, and she replied, "You know I'll always find a way." Where have I been all this time? How could I not notice? I couldn't stay in this silence. I needed to find out who else knew about it, who saw them together, who looked into my eyes, knowing the whole truth. I remembered the conversation with Rosa. Her warnings were already a wake-up call. If she knew, then perhaps others knew too. And then I decided, I need to talk to those who see them more often than me. I wanted to hear the truth from someone else's lips, and if someone knew and was silent, I wanted to look that person in the eyes. I needed to know how deep this lie went. I couldn't keep it to myself any longer. Photos, correspondence, transactions, all this was spinning in my head, turning every minute into torture. I needed someone to look at this from the outside, someone I could trust, even just a little. Rose. I wrote her a short message. We need to talk. This is important. She answered almost immediately, in an hour at the coffee shop next to the office. When I arrived, she was already sitting by the window with a cup of tea, in her usual calm style, no fuss, no nerves. Only when I sat down opposite did her gaze linger on me a little longer. She immediately realized that something serious had happened. "You look like you haven't slept in a couple of days," she remarked, looking me over carefully. "Maybe so," I smiled bitterly, throwing the phone on the table. "I found out everything." Rose frowned, carefully picked up the phone, and looked at the screen. I saw her face change. For the first time ever, she looked truly confused. Damn. She breathed quietly, scrolling through the photos. Jake, this is reality, I interrupted, clasping my fingers. I checked her email, found hotel reservations, transactions, and then the cloud. And here it is. Proof. Damn 3 months, Rose. She looked up at me, and there was a flash of sympathy in them, but also something else, caution. What are you going to do? I ran my hands over my face, leaning back. A question that haunted me. I don't know yet. But now I definitely can't just live, pretending that nothing is happening. Now I have all the cards in my hand. All that remains is to decide how to play this game. Rose was silent for a while, then she put the phone aside and folded her hands on the table. Jake, do you want me to help? I looked at her carefully. There was not a drop of condemnation in her eyes, only interest. She really wanted to be a part of this. How can you help? I asked, slightly surprised. Rose shook her head thoughtfully. You know that I have good connections in the company. I can find out who knew about it. And the main thing is who covered them. Because, believe me, such things do not go unnoticed. If they met in or near the office, someone saw it. And if someone knew and was silent, you have the right to know about it. Her words made me think. I really wanted to know the whole truth, even if it turns out to be even worse than what I have already learned. Okay, I breathed, clutching my head in my hands. I want to know everything. Who, when, where. Am tired of being the one who lives in the dark. Rose nodded and took a sip of tea, looking at me again. Only one condition, Jake. When you know the whole truth, you won't act rashly. Promise me. I don't know if I can promise that, but I'll try. I thought I'd be ready. I knew the truth. I knew that I had been betrayed. I knew that everything I believed in turned out to be a lie. But awareness and acceptance are not the same thing. Anger washed over me like a wave. I left the coffee shop, leaving Rosa at the table, and walked down the street, not even knowing where. My heart was pounding in my chest, and my fists were clenching until it hurt. I wanted. No, I needed to do something. Scream? Break something. Find Mark and punch him so hard hell never be able to grin again? Their messages were before my eyes. Am thinking about you. When will we meet again? I can't today, he's at home. He, me. A husband who did not even suspect that at that moment his wife was sharing a bed with another. I walked down the street, not noticing passers-by, cars, or the noise of the city. There was a buzzing in my ears. Everything inside me was boiling, but my mind demanded a cold calculation. You can't just go and make a scene. I can't show what I know. I didn't notice how I ended up in my car. I slammed the door and just sat there for a few seconds, breathing heavily. Frames from their correspondence flashed before my eyes, a photo of her in someone else's bed, a smile that she did not give to me. It was all too real. All this was not a nightmare, not a figment of my imagination, but a fact that could not be ignored. I hit the steering wheel. Once, then more. A loud sound echoed throughout the cabin, but did not bring relief. The anger didn't go away. He was just growing. The phone vibrated. I automatically looked at the screen. Message from Anna, "I'll be late. Work." I laughed. Deaf, bitter. It was so predictable, so pathetic. Job, certainly. I wonder where she is now. In the office? At the hotel? In his car? 1,000 options flashed through my head. Come home and throw her out the door. Break into her office and watch her make excuses. Pretend I don't know anything and let her trap herself. I imagined bursting in on them, catching them in the act. Anna with her eyes widened in horror, Mark with his ever-smug grin. I imagined waving a phone with her photos in front of her face. You call this love? This is your job. Her pale face, stammering, she tries to say something, but I don't give her a chance. But the more I imagined this scenario, the more clearly I realized it would be too simple. It's too easy for her. For both of them. I ran my hand over my face. I had two options. Break everything off immediately or play my game to the end. If I snap now, I will simply remain a deceived, betrayed husband. I will become a problem for her that she will simply get rid of. And if I can stand it, if I keep my cool, then I can take control of the situation. Then I can decide for myself how this story ends. I took a deep breath and exhaled. The anger didn't go away, but I pushed it deeper, turned it into a tool, because revenge is a dish best served cold, and I was going to serve it perfectly. The first ideas began to form in my head. I couldn't just leave and slam the door. This would be too weak a step. I wanted her to feel the same way I felt. Slowly, not right away. I could start with little things, become colder, move away, let her believe that everything is the same. And then I will destroy her world the same way she destroyed mine. I could make her jealous, create the illusion that I had someone else. I could take Mark out of the game, destroy his reputation in the company, make him beg her to disappear from his life. I could make her doubt every step I took. Anger gave way to grim determination. Now I know what to do. It was no longer an emotional outburst. This was the plan, and he began to emerge more and more clearly. Anger was useless. It devoured me from the inside, but gave me nothing but pain. I could scream, smash furniture, drink myself into oblivion, but what next? She would come home, find me in a state of rage, a scandal would break out, so what? She would burst into tears, start making excuses, and I would either forgive or leave, but in both cases I would lose. I couldn't afford to lose. At first I tried to calm down. Deep breaths, a walk through the city at night, but my thoughts still returned to the same thing. I was just a step, a background, a convenient option. And now they threw me aside without even bothering to hide it properly. I returned home, sat down at my laptop, and began collecting information. First of all, Mark, his weaknesses, his reputation in the company. Did he have any incriminating evidence? What achievements does he have? How valuable is he? I had to find out all this. Then Anna, her career, her connections, what is important to her. If she was willing to risk everything for an affair, then she had vulnerabilities. I just had to find them. I understood that revenge had to be thoughtful. Not an emotional outburst, not a fight, not a scene in the office. I had to put them both in a situation where they would destroy themselves. I had to wait until they stumbled on their own. For now, I'll pretend. I'll be the same Jake she knew. Caring, attentive, and a little naive. Let him relax. Let him think that nothing has changed. Let him believe that I know nothing. Because when I strike, it will be unexpected and destructive. I sat in the darkness of my apartment, contemplating what resources I had. There were many options, but the most important question was how exactly did I want to strike? Quickly, sharply, destroying them in one moment, or prolong this pleasure, forcing them to live in constant fear of discovery. Facts. I had proof. Photos, correspondence, financial transactions, everything that proved their connection. This would be enough to destroy her reputation and career. Mark wouldn't have left without consequences either. In the company where we worked, cheating with a colleague, especially with a married woman, was a slippery topic. Money. They gave me freedom to act. I could hire a private investigator if I wanted to find out more. He could have organized something unexpected to bring them to light. Connections. My colleagues, clients, people I've helped throughout my career. I could start rumors and attack their position. Especially according to Mark, he had too many enemies. I decided that I would not rush. It must have seemed to both of them that everything was going as usual. Let them feel safe while I prepare. Let them think that their secret is safe. The first step is reconnaissance. I had to find out how far they went, who else knew and supported their lies. I wrote to Rose, "I need your help. Meet me tomorrow." She responded quickly, "I'm in." It's time to start the game. I understood that emotions should not control me. Now everything depended on the accuracy of the actions. If I wanted revenge to succeed, I needed not just suspicions, but irrefutable evidence. Not just guesses, but facts that could not be refuted. The first thing I did was start following Anna. Not like a maniac, but carefully, methodically. I memorized her schedule, noted strange moments, frequent delays, route changes, the appearance of new work meetings. The cameras in the office recorded everything, and through Rose I could access the recordings. She didn't ask any questions. She just said, "I'll see what I can do." This was another advantage of her participation. She understood when not to ask unnecessary questions. The next step was her messages. I installed software on her laptop that synchronized conversations in the cloud. It turned out to be easier than I thought. Anna used the same passwords for everything. A couple of days later, I was already reading their correspondence with Mark. "You were incredible today," she wrote. I shuddered. I continued reading, collecting every word, every date, every hint of their meetings. These messages were the key to my game. They didn't just exchange pleasantries, they planned their future, discussed me, and joked behind my back. "He didn't suspect anything?" Mark asked. "No, he doesn't even look in my direction," answered Anna. "I think he's too naive to understand anything." I clenched my fists, feeling rage boiling inside me. It was not just betrayal, it was humiliation. They thought I was so stupid that I didn't even pay attention. I began to see their patterns. They met in the same places at about the same time. Mark acted brazenly, confidently, like a man who believes he will never be caught. This was his weakness. I made a few moves forward. I needed witnesses, people who would confirm everything if I suddenly needed additional leverage. I contacted Rose and asked her to find out who else had seen them together. "I'll talk to a few people," she said. "I think there are those who know something, but prefer to remain silent." She turned out to be right. One of the employees, a guy from the IT department, saw Anna and Mark leaving the hotel. He didn't attach any importance to this, but when Rose carefully hinted to him that such things might be of interest to management, he spoke up. I began to realize that what I had on my hands was not just evidence, but a veritable web of facts that could destroy them both. I felt my confidence growing. I was no longer the same person who was betrayed and humiliated. I was becoming a person who was in control of the situation. And soon the moment will come when I will strike the first blow, and they will not be able to predict this blow. I was no longer a victim. Now I was the director of this play, and my first step was to make them believe that they were safe. I pretended that I didn't know anything. In the morning, he smiled at Anna, made her coffee, and kissed her before work. She smiled back, relaxed, as if everything was as usual, as if I was still her convenient, unsuspecting husband. "You are so caring," she said, sipping her coffee. "Sorry for being so busy lately. I promise it will get easier soon." "Don't worry," I answered calmly. "I understand. Work, stress." She nodded and then hurriedly grabbed her phone when it vibrated on the table. I noticed her quickly turn off the notification and scan the screen. "Mark?" At work, I met Mark in the hallway. He still carried himself with confidence, as if he was on top of the world. His smirk was annoying, but I forced myself to look calm. "Jake," he drawled, crossing his arms over his chest. "Why are you so happy today?" "It's just a good day," I answered evenly. "How are you?" "You know, I like it when people behave honestly, without hypocrisy." He looked at me with feigned seriousness. "You're not one of those people, are you?" I grinned, looking straight into his eyes. "Absolutely. I always appreciate honesty. You too, Mark." His grin faltered for a second. He clearly did not expect such an answer. Fine. Let him feel that something is wrong, but not understand what exactly. The first step is to make them feel comfortable. The second is to start the game. Later, when Anna was sitting in the bedroom with the phone in her hands, I unobtrusively came in and sat down next to her. "Everything is fine?" I asked. "Yes, just work questions," she answered, turning off the screen. "Maybe we can discuss something. You seem stressed lately." No, I'm just tired," she answered quickly and stretched, hiding the slight tension in her voice. "Let's just watch a movie." She tried to play the role of a loving wife, but I already felt how her calm was beginning to crack at the seams. And even later, when she thought I was already asleep, I heard her talking in a whisper to Mark. "Everything is fine?" he asked. "Yes, but I think Jake feels something." Her voice was tense. Are you sure? He's acting. Too calm. This is weird. Relax, Mark replied with irritation. He's a fool. If he had known anything, he would have caused a scandal long ago. I hope so, Anna sighed. I don't want him to start digging. I smiled, lying in the dark. Everything went according to plan. I created an atmosphere of tension. They didn't know what exactly was happening, but the feeling of anxiety began to grow. Now I had to wait. Let them start making mistakes themselves. Let them set themselves up. Anna was nervous. I saw it in her movements, in the way she started checking her phone more often, in the way her fingers lingered on the screen a little longer than usual. She sensed a threat, but couldn't identify it yet. Mark has changed too. He no longer grinned openly, but became more cautious, as if he himself began to suspect something. And this meant only one thing: they were discussing me. They began to feel that the ground under their feet was becoming unsteady. One day, when I entered the office, Rose caught me in the corridor. "We need to talk," she said quietly. I looked at her carefully. There was something new in her eyes, alarm. We stepped aside, away from prying ears. "I learned something," she continued. "Mark isn't just worried. He's digging. I heard him on the phone with someone. He's trying to figure out what you're doing and why you're acting so weird." I clenched my jaw. It was unexpected, but logical. Mark was no fool, confident, yes, but not an idiot. He also knew how to play. "Are you sure he knows something?" I asked. "Not yet, but he definitely feels like something's wrong," Rose replied. "And you know what's most interesting? He thinks you're cheating on Anna." I snorted. Interesting twist. "This might even work to my advantage," I said thoughtfully. "Maybe, but be careful. He doesn't just sit and wait. He has connections and can strike first." This was a new factor that I did not take into account. While I was building my game, my opponent was not sitting idle either, and that made everything much more interesting. I had not planned to return home early, but the day had turned out to be difficult, and I decided to surprise Anna. I bought her favorite coffee on the way, went into the house, and froze on the threshold. Vote. But not just conversation. Muffled, intermittent moans and whispers came from above, from our bedroom. I froze in place, blood pounding in my temples. Slowly, trying not to make a sound, I walked up the stairs. The door was slightly open, and I saw them. Anna, my wife, in my bed, with Mark. "Oh God," she moaned, arching under him. "I missed you so much." "Yes," Mark grinned, his hands squeezing her body. "Then show me how hard it is." She moaned, arching towards him. I saw how her nails dug into his back, how she whispered something in his ear, and I felt physical pain. "With you, I feel alive," Anna breathed, her voice filled with passion. "Jake could never do that." Mark grinned, moving faster. "Could he ever make you scream like that?" His voice was low, mocking. "Never," she moaned. I clenched my fists, watching the way they moved to the beat, the way she looked at him in a way she hadn't looked at me for a long time. "We need to do something about this," Mark muttered without stopping. "If he finds out, it won't be just a scam. He's smart enough to destroy both of us." "He won't find out anything," Anna said confidently, clinging to his shoulders. "And if he finds out, he'll figure out how to convince him that he made it all up." I took a step back, fighting the urge to rush in and tear them to pieces on the spot. But now is not the time. Now I knew for sure the war had begun, and I had to strike first. I couldn't forget what I saw. Their voices, moans, ridicule, all this burned me from the inside. But rage is a bad advisor. I couldn't let my emotions control me. I needed to strike without them even realizing where it came from. I had a joker up my sleeve. Through Rose, I learned that Mark was actively pursuing a promotion. He built a career trying to wrest a new position from management. This was his weak point. One blow to his reputation is enough for him to lose everything. And Anna, she treasured her ideal image. Wife, professional, reliable person. It needed to be destroyed. I created an anonymous account and sent a selection of photographs and screenshots of their correspondence to the company's HR department. The letter stated that Mark uses his position to manipulate colleagues and enter into relationships in the workplace. In our company, this was not tolerated. The next step was to order a bouquet of roses to be delivered to Anna's office. A note was attached to it. You think you have everything under control? You will soon find out the truth. Your secret admirer. She received it right during the meeting. I saw how she turned pale, how her fingers trembled as she read the note. Call Mark. Is that you, damn it? She hissed into the phone. What are you talking about? Mark was confused. Someone knows. Someone is watching us. I smiled. Panic began to take over them. This was just the first step. And soon they will realize that they are in a trap from which there is no way out. After everything that happened, I began to see the world differently. Anger, pain, betrayal, all this melted into cold calculation. But there was something else. Or rather, someone. Rose. She was always there in recent weeks, helping me figure out what was going on behind my back. I saw her as an ally, smart and cool-headed, but only now I began to notice something more in her. I found myself watching how she straightened her hair, how her eyes flashed when she told something with passion. Her voice, soft but confident, suddenly began to sound different to me. She did not have the falseness that Anna lived with. The Rose was real. One evening, as we sat at the bar, discussing the next step in my plan, I noticed that her hand lingered a little longer on mine as she handed me the phone. You have changed, Jake, she said, looking at me carefully. Yes, I grinned, taking a sip of whiskey. Which way? You've become stronger, more confident. A slight smile touched her lips. And you know what's strange? I leaned closer. What? I like it. Her gaze slid over my face, and I realized that something had changed between us. Perhaps it was all a mistake. Perhaps it was right. But at that moment, I wanted only one thing: to find out where this new feeling would lead me. I waited. I gave them a chance to feel safe, to get caught up in their own fears. But now the time has come to strike the final, decisive blow. Mark's career was the first to fall. Management received an anonymous letter with evidence of his office romance, and then documents about financial fraud surfaced. He didn't just lose his job, he was facing an investigation. I made sure the news spread quickly among my colleagues. Anna burst into the house, slamming the door loudly. Her face was distorted with anger. "Did you do this?" she screamed. "Admit it, mother." I just grinned. "What are you talking about, dear? Don't you dare play these games with me, Jacob." She threw her bag on the floor. "You destroyed everything. Mark said it was your doing. You destroyed him." I took a step closer, looking straight into her eyes. "If he said that, he's a coward." "How does that feel? Do you feel like your whole world is falling apart?" "You're pathetic," she spat, her eyes flashing lightning. "You just couldn't keep me, so you're taking revenge like a petty, envious bastard." I laughed, loudly, sincerely. "Hold you back? Anna, you sold yourself for a cheap romance with a bastard who can't even stand up for himself. I will destroy you," she squealed. "Do you think it will end so easily? I'll find a way to get even. I will tell everyone that you are a sick psychopath, that you were stalking me, that you yourself are to blame for this." "Oh, so you want to build a new lie." I nodded, taking out my phone and pressing the play button. Her voice was heard in the room. "He won't find out anything, and if he does find out, I'll figure out how to convince him that he made it all up." Her face instantly turned pale. Did you? Did you write it down?" "Of course, Anna. I've always been smarter than you." I took a step back, gesturing towards the door. "Now pack your things and get out. You have no future. You made your own choice." "No," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Jake, please." I didn't answer. I just closed the door behind her. Mark disappeared. After a scandal at work, criminal proceedings, and the loss of all connections, he was forced to leave. Last I heard, he was trying to get a job in another city, but even there, rumors about him got ahead of him. No one wanted to get involved with a person whose reputation was completely destroyed. His career was over, his influence was gone. He was nobody. Anna also tried to fight, but it was too late. She was fired. Her friends turned their backs on her. Parents could not hide their disappointment, and many acquaintances simply stopped answering the phone. She moved to a rented apartment on the outskirts, away from everyone who knew her former life. But the most interesting thing was that she did not give up trying to save at least something. She texted me, first with requests. Jake, please, let's talk. I'll fix everything. We can start again. Then with threats. You ruined my life. Do you think you can just get away with this? I didn't answer. And then, one evening, she came to see me in person. I opened the door and saw her disheveled, with tear-stained eyes, in a wrinkled coat. Jake, her voice was trembling. We need to talk. Us? I raised an eyebrow, leaning my elbows on the door frame. I'm sure you have something to say, but I don't. Please, I made a mistake. She tried to grab my hand, but I pulled away. I was stupid. Mark deceived me. He took advantage of me. I chuckled, shaking my head. How convenient. When everything falls apart, suddenly you were stupid. And when you were with him in my bed, were you stupid too? She turned pale, but continued. I didn't want it to end like this. Let's try to start from scratch. I looked at her with a long, cold gaze, then leaned closer and whispered, You've already started. Without me. Anna clenched her fists, her face contorted with anger. You're disgusting, she hissed. Do you think you won? Do you think you're better than me? No, I shrugged. I'm just no longer the idiot who let you take advantage of me. Y'all pay me for this, Jake. She stamped her foot, barely holding back tears. Y'all regret doing this to me. I have no doubt that you will try. I opened the door wider, showing her the exit. But now, get out. She stood there for a second, breathing heavily, and then suddenly turned around and walked off into the night. 2 weeks have passed. Life was finally starting to return to normal. Mark disappeared, Anna no longer wrote, and for the first time in a long time, I felt like I could breathe freely. Everything that happened changed me, but did not break me. I knew that there was a new chapter ahead, and this time it would begin according to my rules. This evening I was sitting in a small, cozy cafe, where acquaintances rarely dropped by. Rose was sitting opposite me. We ordered a glass of wine, but for now we just enjoyed the silence. Well, she asked, smiling, looking at me over the rim of her glass. Now that it's all over, what are you going to do? I thought, sliding my fingers along the glass. Don't know. For the first time in a long time, I don't have a clear plan. I looked at her and grinned. And you? I don't know either. But I like this uncertainty. A slight smile touched her lips. Sometimes it's good to just let life take its course. I felt something inside me change. For the first time, I didn't think about the past, didn't dwell on the pain, didn't make plans for revenge. Instead, I looked into the eyes of the girl who was there when I needed it, which did not betray, did not use, did not lie. I think you're right, I said, leaning a little closer. Sometimes you just have to trust the moment. She smiled and gently touched my hand. I didn't pull away. On the contrary, it seemed to me that everything was finally falling into place. Somewhere in the distance, music started playing. People were laughing and talking, and we just sat and looked at each other, knowing that a new life was ahead. And this time, without betrayal.